I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. Will New York say "I do" to same-sex marriage? A state senator joins me to talk about it. Plus, Bishop DiMarzio talks marriage and more. And the Diocese of Brooklyn sponsors buses to protest one senator's vote on the issue.
I think he has betrayed his religion, his membership in the Knights of Columbus, and his constituents. He has sold out.
Well, good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. New York stands stubbornly on the edge of history tonight. The New York State Assembly was expected to vote to grant same-sex couples the right to marry in New York for the fourth time in 2 years. Now the next stop for Governor Andrew Cuomo's Marriage Equality Act is the Senate floor. And after a second surprise defection by a Republican senator yesterday, the state is now just one vote away from approving same-sex marriage. Well, it was a week that began with 8 undecided swing vote senators, 3 Democrats and 5 Republicans. But at a press conference with Governor Cuomo on Monday, the 3 undecided Democrats, Senators Shirley Huntley and Joe Addabbo of Queens and Carl Krueger of Brooklyn, finally came to a decision and announced that they would vote yes on same-sex marriage if and when it comes to a vote in the Senate. Each of those Democrats voted no the last time the controversial measure was up for a vote in 2009. So why the change of heart now? Well, to answer that question, I spoke earlier today to Senator Addabbo to ask him just that question and more. Tell us a little bit about what led to the change for you, because I know back in 2009 you were a no vote.
Back in 2009, we had a sample of about 400 constituents who had, emailed and phone called and contacted me about the issue. And at that point, I truly believed I had a consensus of my people to vote no in 2009. This year, 2 years later, a lot of things changed to an extent, and 6,000 people weighed in this time, roughly, and roughly 80%, 4,800 or so, wanted their state senator to vote yes. This is a difficult issue for me. My Catholic upbringing, Catholic grammar school, high school, college, even Jewish faith law school, my upbringing certainly doesn't allow me to accept marriage equality so quickly. So this is, a very tough vote for me personally. And when I took an oath, there was an oath about representing a district and putting their interest even before my own. And that's basically what's happening here.
Right. Do you think that might lead some people to say, well, Senator Addabbo is taking or making a vote here based solely on politics and being reelected rather than taking a principled stand? What would you say to that?
Not at all. I put my whole body of work out on the line to my constituents and say, if you like the body of work that I've done, if you think I've done a credible job representing you with integrity and, addressing your issues, then send me back to work. It'd be a privilege to do so. So I don't think, this one issue, and certainly, I've had my discussions with the governor and the mayor's office and other lobbyists and so forth, and I've told them all it's not about campaigning and elections, and it's about my people. It's about being a voice always for my people in the 15th Senatorial District.
And any idea of what changed as far as the feeling of your constituents?
For many different people, they have different priorities, and as an elected official, I need to address them all. I know, those individuals of the gay community were very active in my district, going door to door and calling and so forth, but those opponents of marriage equality, those who wanted to not see marriage equality go forward, were as active as well. Announcements were made in church and in the tablet and church bulletins. There were ads on TV and ads in the paper. So both sides, both pro and con, were very active in my district. My conversations with Bishop DiMarzio weeks ago about, the issue, and I said to him, the gay community is very active in my district. And so, I do believe that both sides should be heard from.
And you've talked about your faith, and obviously you just mentioned Bishop DiMarzio there. Of course, he, after Monday and after the press conference, he, of course, expressed some regret about the way things were looking as far as the way this vote might possibly go down. Also, Archbishop Timothy Dolan of the New York Archdiocese saying roughly the same kind of thing. And then also today, the Brooklyn Diocese sponsored a few buses to actually head out to your office in the district.
They were in front of my office today.
Yeah. How does all of that make you feel as far as reconciling your faith with the politics of the issue?
Well, I am still a Catholic. I'll always be a Catholic, and of course, in my own eyes, still see marriage as traditional man and woman, what we're doing here in Albany in my conversations with the governor is extending marriage for a civil ceremony so that these couples can get the same rights as a married couple. But in the end, I'm still a Catholic. The residents who were in front of my office today were very respectful. I had my office staff go out there to show them the boxes of postcards, probably numbering around 3,000 postcards now, of people who want me to vote for same-sex marriage.
I wanted to ask you as well about possibly religious exemptions in the bill,
yes.
and also, there are fears among many in the church that I've talked to over the last couple of days that a marriage equality bill would lead to possibly a loss of tax-exempt status for the church because they can't provide that particular service.
Matt, that's a great point. It's a very serious point. I'm surprised it's a point that the diocese, though, did not bring up to the governor ever since January, since the governor's been talking about marriage equality. That's an issue that has not been brought to the governor's attention until I brought it to the governor's attention subsequent to my conversation with Monsignor Harrington to talk to him about the seriousness of this possibility. And the religious exemptions are in the bill. Obviously that no religious institution has to acknowledge a same-sex marriage, has to take part in the ceremony, has to take part in the reception. Knights of Columbus laws are included. These are some of the exemptions that I had forwarded to the governor's office, relaying the concerns of my religious leaders in my district that I spoke to.
And lastly, the fate of the bill, where do you think things stand now and where will they go?
I guess that's the million-dollar question, I suppose. As of now, there are 31 senators, 2 Republicans included, that are favoring this bill. There is 32 needed, so technically the governor is 1 vote short. We basically could see a bill before Friday, but obviously those discussions are still ongoing.
All right, still up in the air. Well, Senator Joseph Adabo of Queens, thank you so much, sir, for your time. Really appreciate it once again.
Matt, my pleasure, and thanks for your time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, stay with us. Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio weighs in on the debate on same-sex marriage and more next. Welcome back. Well, I am joined now here in the studio by a man that many of you might recognize as the editor of The Tablet, but who you might not know is also my boss now, our brand new news director here at Currents, Ed Wilkinson. Ed, thanks for joining me here.
Oh, Matt, it's great to be part of the team here.
Well, it's great to have you, very, very much. And you got kind of your first... well, I guess we kind of threw you in head first today.
With baptism by fire.
That's right, that's right. With talking to Bishop DiMarzio, and he talked about several things. I know you talked about the same-sex marriage thing, but you started off the conversation talking about the bishop's meeting that he's in right now, actually in Seattle.
Yeah, the bishop was in Seattle, and he called in because we said we wanted to speak to him about the bishop's agenda. And mostly what they're talking about there today is about the Charter for the Protection of Children. But while we had him on the phone, we also wanted to get his take on what's happening in New York with the same-sex marriage legislation. And he was quite eager to talk about it.
Well, great. Well, let's have a look and see what Bishop DiMarzio had to say.
Bishop, how are you? Bishop DiMarzio, you're in Seattle this morning.
I'm in Seattle. We're seeing a little sun today. Usually it was been raining every day.
That's unusual for Seattle, the sunshine.
Now it seems to be the way things are out here.
Well, I know that the first public meetings of the bishops, you're just finally getting together today. Can you give us an idea of what some of the hot topics on the agenda will be?
Well, one of the main topics would be the reauthorization of the Charter for the Protection of Children. Every 5 years we reauthorize this charter, and there is a reauthorization up. Certain changes, minor changes have been suggested to improve it. So that'll be a major topic. We're also speaking about the liturgy, preparing for this November when we will have a new English translation of the Roman Missal. There also are some work on the Spanish version of the Roman Missal for the United States. So there are several things. There'll be also reports from the various committees of what their activities. So in comparison to the November meeting, this is a rather light meeting. It's just 2 days. Normally it's 3 days. But this is a smaller meeting on the agenda side.
How do the bishops feel about the way the charter is being put into effect in the United States? Are they pretty much pleased with the effect that it's had at this point?
I think overall it's been a very great success, especially the program for the protection, the prevention program. We have clear guidelines on how to deal with anybody who abuses. So it's been very useful. I think, again, there's always exceptions to misunderstanding, but I would say overall it's been a great charter, and it's helped tremendously.
Do you think that there would be any changes as to the implementation of the charter here in our own diocese after what you hear at this meeting?
Probably not. I think we're actually ahead in some ways. We have outside reporting where there's no diocesan involvement in any report. So this goes directly to the district attorneys, and so we have, I think, even a little better system than the charter recommends.
Of course, here in New York right now, the big news topic has been the same-sex marriage bill that's currently being proposed in Albany. Is there any discussion about this topic among the bishops themselves in Seattle?
It will be discussed in the meeting. We have a report on the countrywide situation on same-sex marriage. Certainly the New York situation, which is red hot, will be discussed. It's unfortunate that our politicians have listened to the elites and not really listened to the people. And really, government should be not in the business of regulating affection between people of the same sex. Marriage is the province of the state because marriage brings forth life, children, which are the subject of the state. So it is a very difficult time to people misunderstand freedom and tolerance, and because of this say, well, if it doesn't bother me, I don't care what other people do. That's the unfortunate attitude that we see today. Unfortunately,
some of the votes that have switched from no votes to yes votes have been legislators right here in our own diocese. Is that particularly painful to you, or do you...
Especially one who was Catholic. I mean, I think Catholics should have a little different perspective. They know what the Church teaches. Supposedly, he is basing it on his constituents, but we disagree that his constituents do not support same-sex marriage overwhelmingly. But this will be a point of contention in the future.
Yeah. Well, what do you think went wrong with the campaign to oppose this? As of last week, we thought this thing wasn't even going to come up for a vote on the floor, and it changed almost overnight.
Well, again, it's the votes. It's not the people changing their mind. It's the politicians being enticed by promises in one way or another, so they don't keep their promises. They have other things that they're looking to gain, and that's what I believe happened.
Yeah. Some of these people are citing polls in their own neighborhoods, but when you look at these neighborhoods, you would think that they would be opposed to same-sex marriage.
There should be a matter of polls anyhow. It's a matter of what's right and what's wrong, and what is the province of the state and what should not be. So it isn't just public opinion that should dictate this. It has to be some value system.
Bishop, the last question is that there does seem to be an exemption for church agencies, but the State Catholic Conference says that it's not enough, that basically we're against this because of moral principle. Is that your stand?
The exemption is not ironclad, and there's so many things that has happened in other states that it just is, we're unprotected. Basically, our agencies that are hiring people will be forced to give benefits to same-sex couples. It will be maybe that we will not be forced to marry, hopefully, couples. That cannot happen. We can't do that, but the protections or minimal religious liberty is not considered really in this bill.
Okay. Well, Bishop, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And we'll be back in touch when you come back to Brooklyn.
Very good. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
A lively discussion with Bishop DiMarzio. It was early in Seattle this morning when you talked to him. I know.
Well, I apologize to the bishop for talking to him. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, Seattle time, and he said not to worry. He was up at 5 o'clock. So.
That's good. That's the Bishop DiMarzio we know and love.
He's always one to tell us exactly what's on his mind.
That's right. That's right. Well, Ed, thank you so much for talking to him and getting his insight. Really appreciate it.
Matt, it was a pleasure, and again, it's good to be part of the team.
Well, it's great to have you. Thanks. Well, stay with us. Could single-sex dorms be the answer to ending the hookup culture? One Catholic university hopes so. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, he says he's voting yes on same-sex marriage. We'll take you to a rally of protesters outside the office of one Queens state senator. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Well, the Vatican has announced it is hosting a major symposium next year to promote the best ways to combat sexual abuse. The symposium is scheduled for February at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. It is intended to help bishops and religious orders respond to the Vatican's earlier request to prepare plans to deal with sex abuse. Workshops at the symposium will be led by experts in psychology, pastoral care, law, and theology. In other news from Rome, Pope Benedict held what has been called a cabinet meeting with the leaders of the Roman Curia, the Church's central governing body. The Vatican has not released any details, but the website Catholic Culture says such meetings are rare. An Italian journalist who closely follows the Holy See says the leaders talked about men's and women's religious communities. Among the specifics that the leaders discussed, how commitment to a religious community should not work against the unity of the church as a whole. Well, Congressman Peter King has kicked off a second round of hearings on radicalization of American Muslims. It happened in Washington. The House Homeland Security Committee is looking at the recruitment of terrorists in America's prisons.
A number of cases since September 11th have involved terrorists who converted to Islam or radicalized to Islam in American prisons, then subsequently attempted to launch terror strikes here in the U.S. upon their release from custody. They have also carried out terrorist attacks overseas.
But Michigan Democrat Hanson Clark says his committee is focusing on the wrong thing.
I'm a Democrat. Some of you who are Tea Party members, this is the waste we've got to stop. We're spending too much money incarcerating young men, young black men whose lives could be saved. It's not about Islam. It's about the sentencing policy. It's about this prison system. We've got to change that.
And a number of groups, which include prominent Muslim organizations, also sent a letter to Congressman King. They say they are concerned that no one from the Federal Bureau of Prisons or the Justice Department was invited to testify. Well, closer to home, EMC Frontline Pregnancy Centers had its day in court today in an effort to stop New York City's controversial Bill 371 from going into effect. The bill would impose restrictions on pro-life pregnancy centers in the city, requiring them to let people know they do not provide abortion services or artificial contraception. EMC founder and president Chris Slattery rallied people outside District Court in Manhattan today. EMC operates 12 centers throughout New York City. Proponents of Bill 371 say they just want truth in advertising. Slattery says the law, though, which is scheduled to take effect July 14th, is an attack on his First Amendment rights that could effectively cripple EMC. We'll have full coverage of the story on tomorrow's show. Well, meanwhile, the latest battle over Wisconsin's controversial collective bargaining bill has been decided. Brendan Conway has that story.
In a 9-page ruling that immediately drew praise from Republicans and scorn from Democrats, the state Supreme Court overruled a lower court and validated the controversial collective bargaining bill that has been in legal limbo.
I think, it was something that we just believed that the legislature has always had the ability to do, no matter if it was Democrats or Republicans that were in charge.
The mere fact that they ruled against taking any enforcement decision means that the legislature is now, from a policy standpoint, above the law.
State Senator Alberta Darling, who is facing a recall election based primarily on voting for the collective bargaining bill, says the court's ruling is vindication for everyone who supported the measure.
All the reforms we put in now will be realized, and we can go forward with certainty.
We always felt that we followed our rules the way we normally do, and that we never violated the Constitution, and that's what the court felt as well.
The law, which strips most public workers of their collective bargaining rights, sparked massive protests at the Capitol. Democrats acknowledge they don't have the votes to stop it from moving forward now, but they vow to do something about it in the future.
It's going to take a while for us to rebuild the gains of the last century that were just repealed here, but we're prepared to do it, and that's what we're working on.
That report from Brendan Conway. Well, Southern Baptists voted today on an immigration measure at their annual convention in Phoenix. The resolution called on churches to be the presence of Christ to all persons, regardless of their country of origin or immigration status. The resolution also called on government authorities to implement a just and compassionate path to legal status for undocumented immigrants already living in the U.S. The results of that vote were not yet known. Well, the push to ban circumcisions in San Francisco may have hit a congressional roadblock. California Congressman Brad Sherman will reportedly introduce legislation preventing any ban on circumcision anywhere in the U.S. Now, a measure to ban the procedure on any male under the age of 18 will appear on the ballot in San Francisco this November. In a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle last month, San Francisco Archbishop George Niederauer called the measure a misguided initiative, citing concerns over religious freedom and health. Well, meanwhile, the president of Catholic University of America has announced his school will return to single-sex dormitories. Writing in the Wall Street Journal, Catholic U President John Garvey says the move is being made to reduce binge drinking and the hookup culture. He says beginning next year, all freshmen will be assigned to single-sex residence halls. It's expected that the transition will take a few years to complete. And we may have to wait a few more months in this country, but the church in Australia has already gotten its first taste of the new English Mass translation. Sydney Archbishop Cardinal George Pell says the first Masses with the new translation had gone smoothly. He told the newspaper The Australian that people from around his archdiocese are quietly appreciative. Well, stay tuned. There is more currents ahead. When we return, the Brooklyn Diocese rallies for traditional marriage.
My sense in talking to the priests in these communities and talking to the people in these communities is they're overwhelmingly opposed to this legislation, and they have made that opposition known.
Earlier in the show, we heard from Queens State Senator Joseph Adabo. He was one of 3 local senators who earlier this week announced they would vote yes on a bill to legalize same-sex marriage after having voted no back in 2009. Well, as Adabo told us, he's voting yes after polling his constituents on the issue. The senator says close to 5,000 of the more than 6,000 people who responded to his survey say they support legalizing same-sex marriage. Adabo's yes vote, though, stands in stark opposition to the teachings of the Catholic Church on marriage, and a group of local Catholics decided to go and voice their outrage over the senator's decision outside Adabo's office in Howard Beach.
The reason why folks are here today is because they are expressing their disappointment to their state senator, Senator Joe Adabo, for being more concerned about pressing a radical liberal social agenda than helping them to get jobs and make sure they can stay in their homes. Praise God, praise Jesus started with 12, and there are 30-somewhat people here who are out in front taking time off from work to express to their state senator what they feel about an issue that's really important to them.
Marriage is sacred. It's supposed to be between a man and a woman. So by diluting that, you just spit on God's face, what he gave us.
A woman and another woman cannot make babies, so therefore, how can we multiply? How can we keep reproducing? I don't think God wanted it for us to end, He wanted us to keep going.
We did a survey. We sent out survey cards to all the residents of the 15th Senatorial District. The responses came in over 6,000. I believe the number was 6,015. 4,839 of them are yeses. 1,176 are noes. He says, I took an oath of office to represent the views of my district. I have in his opinion, a moral and a legal obligation to put his personal views aside.
I find it hard to believe that those who call the senator supporting same-sex marriage are his constituents. I mean, certainly if he represented Park Slope or the East Village, maybe that would be the case. But, my sense in talking to the priests in these communities and talking to the people in these communities is they're overwhelmingly opposed to this legislation.
The members of the district that are conservative and that are Republican and that do not want that need to call us. The senator met and spoke with numerous pastors. He's spoken with Bishop DiMarzio on 3 different occasions. He's been on 2 Catholic radio shows. And each place he begged people to call him.
I think he has betrayed his religion, his membership in the Knights of Columbus, and his constituents. He has sold out.
After this, he'll have something to think about. I feel that we definitely have put something on his mind. We're here. We've been here for about like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and we're not going anywhere.
I believe that he can change his vote. I believe if he follows his heart, by a miracle, he might change his mind. I'm going to keep fighting until everyone agrees with the same thing. Because even when there was slavery, there was a lot of people that weren't opposing slavery, and it was wrong.
He is supposed to do what he knows to be right. The last time it came up, he knew what was right. He still does know what's right. But what he is looking for now is political expediency. And I certainly hope his political expediency costs him his job next year.
Some people with some harsh words and sentiments for Senator Addabbo. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Now, we'll have much more on all of this tomorrow. We'll hear from Maggie Gallagher of the National Organization for Marriage. Her group has been one of the major players opposing the passage of the same-sex marriage bill here in New York. Until then, though, be sure to visit us online over at currentsny.net. You can also check us out on Facebook, and we're on Twitter. Our handle is @currentsny. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching us, and have a great night.